All right, so this is Module 9. We're going to talk about strategies to teach and engage culturally diverse learners and ELs, so our English learners. A lot of this is going to be this is all a lot of overlap. You'll see things from the culturally responsive pedagogy, as well as things that you're probably familiar with from previous classes that you've had. So let's get right in. First thing I have found in my experience working with diverse learners um, is creating clear goals for your students to see is really, really big. A lot of schools push this anyways, so I wouldn't be surprised if you are experiencing this now or when you get into the classroom if this isn't just a part of your daily routine. But providing I can statements is a really good way to do this. I can statements are basically like what you would like those kids to accomplish during the class. What are they going to walk away from as a learned individual when they leave your classroom? I like to think of an I can statement as like you're trying to help that student answer that question that their parents are going to ask them. What'd you learn in school today? Well, I learned that I can do such and so forth. I can tell you about learning effective learning strategies. So, that's how I look at it. SWABAT or student will be able to is just another form of that. This is a little bit more of the old school. I cans are, for all intents and purposes, the new hotness. There's going to be a lot of bullet points with this PowerPoint, just because there's a lot of suggestions. So, go through this. I think, taking highlight, copy, paste things that you find effective is a great way to do this, and then kind of going back, just consolidating. So we're going to go over this. I've got this broken up into what the beginning, the middle, and the end of a class typically could and should look like for building relationships and support. Um, I also teach art, and one of the biggest things that I can say is part of my instruction is building relationships. It goes so far in your classroom, and it even especially if you've got immigrant families, you will have brothers and sisters, and it absolutely makes a difference when they walk through the door if their older siblings have had a good experience. So here are some things. Offer warm welcomes. That's so big. If you've got diverse learners, learn how to say hello in their language. It's an easy thing to do, and man, does it make a difference. And it's fun. The kids really like it. Um, Connecting the do now or I can activity. What do you want them to do? Um, Making sure they write down their I can or their SWABAT statement for the day in an agenda is a great way to do it. It gives them the ability to reference it, and it lets them know exactly what they're going to be doing and what they need to learn. Um, if you can connect it to student lives, that's always good. Genuine learning is great. Posting the language and standard, that write down that I can statement, put it up on the board, let them see. Um, and make that an attainable goal for the student. Expect that they will meet that objective, and be really clear and concise when you're giving your instruction. During class is a big one. I'm not going to go through every one of these. You know, Guided practice is really big, especially for ELs. You really need to show the steps on that, and a lot of times you need to show more steps than you think you should. Really break it down. Visual timers are great for discussions. They're just also good for independent work and to keep things from going too long. Nonverbal commands, it makes me think of just to get the classroom organized. So, you know, 1, 2, 3, and they respond with eyes on me. I'm sorry, it's 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, and then they say 1, 2, eyes on you. It's pretty silly, but it works. Clapping, I will suggest this: don't count down. When you count down, it means you get to zero. And if you get to zero, you have to make a choice on what happens at zero. A lot of times it's you're having to go towards discipline when you don't need to. Sometimes kids are just talkative. I have found that clapping in a pattern, like clap, 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 and then they repeat it, or clap once if you can hear me, clap twice, and you go up. And this is just me. Don't go down. When you get to zero, a repercussion has to happen, and and that can kind of derail a classroom. Thumbs up, thumbs down is always great. It is a great one for nonverbals. It's also really good if you have students who have higher listening than speaking skills, or they're still in their silent period. They can be in that silent period, they can still answer questions, and more importantly, you can check for comprehension. Um, let's see, using movement at any time students can get up and move around, it's great. I know a lot of people think that that is too childish for older students, but that's really not the case. Big kids are still kids, and they do well if they get to move around. They all have energy. Think about long classes that you have to sit in. Even as adults, it's pretty rough. If I'm sitting down for more than 20 minutes, it drives me crazy. It starts to itch. So, use movement. Um, have students talk with each other. Use visual aids, kinesthetics. Um, anytime you can get a uh, tactile coupling of something, if students are exploring something, having them learn about that thing while touching, that can be helpful. If they're learning about shapes or forms, using a sphere to have them get to manipulate it, it always works well. All right. As the class wraps up, um, ending with a creative activity before you go, let's do this, is a good way to just kind of wrap things up. Tickets to leave and exit tickets, a great way to do it. Just kind of it's a great way to do a quick assessment on whether or not the student understood what was happening. Telling the students goodbye, that's a big thing. Let the student leave knowing that you care and you love them. It's big. It really helps out. Those personal connections are so huge. All right, so some strategies. We're going to go over a lot. So formative assessment, think, pair, share, student groups is a great way to engage learners. Note taking and summarizing during direct instruction is also a really good way. It just kind of gets the student keyed into what's going on, keeps them from nodded off when we lecture for a long time. It's hard to keep students engaged. So giving them a task. Physical movement, also a really good way to do it. Music, repetition, songs are great, even with older students. I know it sounds goofy, but it really works. Making students visible, acknowledging students' cultural differences in a way that is uplifting, of course. It's about showcasing what makes those students unique, and really letting them kind of lead the class through their experiences. And also differentiated instruction, which is huge for ELs. Sometimes it doesn't work the same way for everybody, and having a kind of a plan on how you can to go at instruction in a different way that helps other learners is good to think about, at least be mindful of. Um, Also look at questioning strategies. How do we engage that higher level questioning? Having students really think and create answers. Also looking at individual project-based learning is good. And then obviously your vocabulary and writing instruction. So it's a lot of strategies. And it's probably things that you've learned in other classes, but it all wraps around. And that's kind of one of the points of this class, is to take those things that we've learned in other classes and see how it applies to a culturally diverse classroom. All right, so technology. Technology is great. We've talked about call and the advantages and disadvantages of it, so I'm going to go real quick through this. Having students use technologies to look at real world problems is great, and technology is a great way to look at current um, current things that are happening. Um, so another thing that we can look at is providing access and information that professionals use, such as PowerPoint. I mean, it doesn't have to be Adobe, which is a huge program, but it could be. How to do simple things. Scaffolded learning using technologies such as calculators, spreadsheets, providing opportunities for students to reflect and identify changes in learning. Um, Concept maps, graphic organizers, digital journals are really cool. Creating their own websites for portfolios would be great. Google Sites is a great free opportunity for that. And then also collaborating through email, I think, is a really good thing. It allows the students to connect with you, as well as having them using a tool that they will use as a professional. Classroom management. So these are things that they should, when a student comes into an effective learning classroom, these are things that they should expect. And it's a lot of things that are, are given, such as that respect and to be treated fairly, but they need to feel that. They need to feel that they will get help when they need it. They need to know that they're going to be working with individuals. That's important. That students don't think that they're just going to be working on their own. Um, they also need to know, um, being noticed by Miss Jones. Sorry, this is from an older thing, but they need to know that you're a part of the class. That you're not just going to be sitting at the desk. You know, that you're going to be up, moving around, okay, and that they'll participate. For the needs of our English language learners to be successful and to become engaged, one thing that we need to do is we need to use reading and materials that are that the students recognize. This could be things that are culturally relevant to our students. This could also and does need to be looked at in terms of, is this at student ability level or right above student ability level? We want to push our students. We don't want to give them things that are too easy. At the same time, we don't want to blow them out of the water, so to speak. And just it, so just making sure that is it's something that the student will recognize. Um, Using interactional styles, and that things that students are familiar with, and a lot of that is building that regiment, and those expectations that the students have in the classroom. They'll know what those prompts. Maybe you have a prompt that means it's time to circle up. Maybe they know that when they do think, pair, share. Having those interactional styles, um, that students can recognize. Involve parents and families in the students' education. That's huge. We've talked about that in other modules. Can't be said enough. And be brave. Make home visits. Be engaged in the community. That's a big thing. And that can be tough and a little uncomfortable, but it'll go miles. Um, English language learners also just make sure that they that they're that the foundation for effective practice is the same as it is with with our native born or traditional students. We're all working towards that same goal. Um, you know, if an EL is real naive and they're really working on English, you got to look at that as what supports are you going to need to also have. That's a big one with science. It's a lot of vocabulary, a lot of very particular vocabulary, and so we have to look at how we can work around that. Visual aids are really good. Pictures, um, really getting hands on with it, even at the older level. Choose strategies based on understanding of research based practices. There's so much research out there. Just Google it and use things that we've talked about in this class, for sure. And last but not least, focus on academic language. That's a big one with our ELs. They have that access test, like we talked about with WIDA. And academic language is big. Getting students to talk is awesome. Don't get me wrong. Students need to be able to communicate with their peers, but how they communicate with peers is not academic language, and they need to also work on that academic language. Okay. So, in terms of literacy engagement for our ELLs, there's a couple things we need to look at. We have kind of a long list here. I'm just going to go through a few that really stand out. First, integrating one of the 4 domains that would be listening, speaking, reading, and writing into our instruction. And that is something that we need to look at no matter what our discipline is, even if we're math or science, elective, PE. We need to look at how we can put this in. And, speaking and listening, those are 2 that come to mind that we probably use more often than not. But we just need to be intentional about it. So another thing would be focusing on vocabulary development, especially if our discipline is not English, where vocabulary is going to be very specific. We need to make sure that we're looking at that. We're using the vocabulary ourselves in our instruction as well as in conversation with the students so they can see how to use it. Anytime we can activate background knowledge, that's huge. We should always take advantage of that. Looking at language through content or themes is great. That's a real sneaky way to get that language in there without them knowing that they're learning language. So take advantage of it. Use native language strategically. For me, that's the hellos and goodbyes. If you want to incorporate their native language into your instruction, go for it. But that can also be a very big task, especially if they feel like that is something that is of the norm, and that's going to happen all the time. That can be a big thing for you, but it's definitely effective. Pair technology with existing interventions. So instead of a ticket to leave where they write on a post-it and give it to you, maybe they write you an email. That's taking something old and making it new. So also, adolescents love choice. If they feel like they have a choice, that they're kind of in control, that's big, and that'll help motivate. All right. So lastly, we need to look at this from the perspective of ourselves. We looked at how our students feel, but now we need to talk about ourselves. So these are 4 questions you should really ask yourself when looking at instruction. How do you feel? How do you feel about the information? How do you feel in general? Are you ready to be with your class? Are you interested in the material? This is a big thing because students can really glean off this. Find something about the material that you're interested in. That can be easier said than done sometimes, but usually if you're passionate enough to be a teacher, yeah, chances are you're probably going to be into it, the material at least at some degree. Is it important? What is important about the skill that our student needs to learn, and how can I showcase that? So really looking at that. And the last one is, can I do it? Is this something that you can teach? So make sure that is go over these 4 questions. I think it's good. So it's great for new teachers. I think it's really important for veteran teachers. I think this is something that we need to come back to at least every few years, as far as our content to get to know about it. So last but not least, I want to leave you with this kind of when there is engagement between the teacher and the content, and the students believe the teacher cares for them, the student will engage with the content and with the caring teacher. It's huge. There's a lot of buy-in, and the students can tell whether or not you're involved and invested. So just to look at that, we went over a lot of things. Here's our discussion prompt. So as it said, this module has a ton of bullet points and various ways to meet the needs of ELs and students in general. So what I want you to do is I want you to choose 2 and discuss in your own language, so in your own words, how you think that these would be the most effective working with culturally and linguistically diverse students in your particular content area. I want you to be specific on this. I want you to make a scenario and kind of play it out. Please don't be super brief. I'm not asking you for a 2-page paper on this, but more than just a paragraph. I want you to really think about this, because this is big, and this is something that you will be that will be on your plate as a teacher, and it's important to have it. So thank you very much for listening to this lecture. I look forward to reading your discussion posts. Everyone take care.